Okay, thank you, and welcome to Oregon Job Seekers, Who They Are and How Libraries Can Help. I'm pleased to introduce our two speakers today who will give us a lot of great insight into our topic today. So let me bring up my slide that shows gives you more details. First, we'll have Liza Morehead, who is a research analyst at Worksystems, Inc., which is a nonprofit in the Multnomah County area, Portland, Multnomah County, and Washington County. And also we have on our panel today, Michele Martin, who is a director at the Hildreth Center for Workforce Development at Rutgers in New Jersey, and is also the director of several projects, Career Network projects, the New Start Career Network and the New Jersey Career Network online job seeker community. And we'll be hearing more about those today. So without further ado, I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and we'll go ahead and have Liza help and get us started.
Thank you, Arlene. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation here. We are witnessing an extraordinary moment in Oregon's labor market. The COVID-19 economic crisis was swifter and more severe than the Great Recession. But so far, the recovery has also been swifter. Within 18 months, we went from unprecedented levels of unemployment to a shortage of workers, forcing businesses to cut their hours, accelerate automation, and in some cases, permanently close their doors. Many workers found themselves out of a job. Others were forced to leave the labor force due to increased caregiving responsibilities or fear of catching COVID, or in some cases, the results of catching COVID. For some workers, the past 18 months translated into higher wages and greater flexibility in where and when they work. For others, it meant a new career. The highs and lows of the past year have not been evenly distributed. Across geographies, industries, and occupations, the COVID economy has impacted Oregons differently. So where are we in the post-COVID recovery? The post-COVID economic recovery, and what does that mean for workers? Today, I'll talk about recent trends in unemployment rates, what we know about the people filing for unemployment claims, jobs that are hard to fill, and in-demand jobs that provide opportunities for people who are out of work or looking for new opportunities. I'll also talk about keeping some workers on the sidelines. Prior to the pandemic, the unemployment rate in Oregon was at an all-time low. The good news is that we are getting back to where we were. Last week, 4,200 people filed initial unemployment claims in Oregon. Now, that's higher than the 3,500 who filed during 1 week in February 2020, but it is just a fraction of the more than 78,000 people who filed initial unemployment claims in just 1 week in April 2020. Continued claims are also down significantly. And this was true even before the supplemental unemployment program ended in September. So what do we know about people who are filing unemployment claims? Honestly, not nearly as much as we would like to. The state asks claimants for their sex, race, and ethnicity, but they're not required to answer. And so many people choose not to answer that question, but the data that we get from people who do answer is meaningless. For example, more people chose not to answer their sex than reported being female. So has this affected women more than men? Probably, we think so. Nationally, definitely. In Oregon, we don't have great numbers, but there are a few things that we do know. We know that nearly half of claimants worked in just a few industries, accommodation and food services, retail, and healthcare prior to being unemployed. We also know the level of education of people filing continued unemployment claims. In Oregon, about 27% of adults 25 and older did not go beyond high school in their education. Yet nearly 60% of people filing continued unemployment claims each month since the beginning of the pandemic do not have education beyond high school. And we also know workers filing for unemployment tend to be older than the workforce overall. So what we know that we can see is older, less educated workers finding themselves unemployed at a time in their careers that they probably didn't expect and definitely can't afford to be unemployed. There were more than 65,700 fewer jobs in September 2021 in Oregon than in September 2019. Some of those jobs are not coming back. Businesses closed, the rate of automation increased, changes in consumer demand and interruptions to the global supply chain altered the business landscape. Loss was not evenly distributed. Jobs that paid well actually increased in Oregon in 2020. The category with the largest losses was jobs in the 25th percentile of wages. So if you took all the jobs and spread them out over, a 100-point scale, those jobs in the bottom quarter that paid the least declined 14%, while jobs that paid in the top 75th percentile actually increased by 1%. Now, in some industries, including construction, trade, transportation, utilities, and professional and business services, these industries gained jobs during this period. Those gains, however, were modest and far outpaced by job losses in manufacturing, education and health services, and most notably leisure and hospitality. Jobs numbers count people who are currently employed. What they don't count is jobs employers are unable to fill. Changes in how and where we work, shop, and spend our leisure time has created strong demand in certain occupations. Stockers, order fillers, and truck drivers have never been more in demand than they are right now. And the pandemic itself has increased demand for many healthcare occupations, in particular nurses, nursing assistants, and medical assistants. So where can job seekers find steady employment? Despite everything, many employers are scrambling to find willing and qualified workers. Between August and September 2021, there were more than 300,000 unique online job postings for open jobs in Oregon. And that is pulling together job sites like Indeed, large employer sites like Providence might have, all the different places that people can go online to find jobs are included in this statistic. And these jobs range from home healthcare aides to CEOs. They cover different occupations, different career levels, different pay levels. I apologize for this slide being a little fuzzy, but I will explain it and hopefully that will do the trick. So nearly half of the most in-demand jobs in Oregon don't require education past high school or previous work experience. These jobs include light truck drivers, maintenance and repair workers, warehouse workers, and customer service reps. And there are other jobs that are highly in demand that require a short amount of high school education, but no previous work experience. The most in-demand job in that category is heavy and tractor-trailer truck drivers. And computer user support specialist also falls into that category, although the training for that is a little bit longer. Educational pipeline for workers in high demand jobs was interrupted by the pandemic. There was a dip in enrollments in training and educational programs. Some programs suspended operations, others limited the number of in-person slots to accommodate for social distancing. Some moved online with limited participation, which limited participation to students with computers and high-speed internet. Students also stayed away due to economic uncertainty, fear of COVID, and increased caregiving responsibilities. Enrollment in Oregon community colleges was down 23% in fall of 2020 compared to fall of 2019. And we're still waiting for those numbers for the fall of 2021. So all the workers that we expect to come through that pipeline, many of them didn't come through. And so that has increased the demand for workers in the type of training and education programs that people go to community colleges for. Most in-demand occupation in Oregon is registered nurses, and all year it's flipped back and forth from registered nurses to heavy and tractor-trailer truck drivers. Those are the two top in-demand occupations. Registered nurses requires a bachelor's degree and a licensure exam. It takes at least 4 years plus prerequisites to get there. But there are a number of credentials that require less time, but are required for in-demand jobs. Top credential, there is a commercial driver's license, which you need to be a tractor trailer truck driver. Other qualifications that can help people get in-demand jobs and take significantly less time to complete include a food handler's card and a licensure for a certified nursing assistant. Not all unemployed workers are ready or able to return to work. Some are waiting for childcare. The number of childcare workers in Oregon dropped 40% during the pandemic. Daycare centers and after-school programs have limited capacity to account for social distancing and new regulations around COVID. And while schools have reopened, COVID quarantines and stricter rules about keeping children with colds at home has limited the availability for parents and grandparents to return to work. Now, children under 12 should be able to get their COVID vaccines soon for families that choose that, and that could accelerate their caregivers returning to the labor force. Vaccine mandates are encouraging some workers to return to work, but others are choosing to leave the workforce or at least to leave their current jobs rather than comply with the mandate. Many of us have reassessed our lives during the past 20 months, and for some workers, this reassessment included their current jobs or careers. Workers are exploring new opportunities and training for new careers, and all of this is in flux. One of the most dramatic things that we've seen is the quits rate, which measures the number of people who quit their jobs. We don't have great numbers for Oregon, but nationally, we're seeing 3% every month of the labor force quit their job. For some people, they are going home for caregiving, taking care of elderly or sick relatives, taking care of children. Other people are choosing to go back to school, to find new jobs, to take a break from the labor force. Other people have come to the conclusion that the jobs they've been working aren't worth the money that they're earning. And then some people are just leaving their job and going into another job. For a large part of the past 20 months, the quits rates were down and we weren't seeing people switch jobs. The economic uncertainty and the new way of doing business was keeping people from the regular moving to a new job that happens. And now we're making up for that. So a lot of people who aren't unemployed are looking for different jobs, different opportunities, different career trainings. And trends that we're seeing now are all in flux. The economy is changing, the virus is changing, the way that workers think about their careers is changing. I hope I've been able to shed some light on Oregon's labor market as it exists today. If you have questions about how these trends are playing out in your region, either very specifically or broadly, please get in touch. I work for the Workforce Board in Multnomah and Washington Counties, but I have access to and work with statewide data, and I'm happy to help to answer some of your questions or to help you connect with someone in your region who can give you more information. Does anyone have questions that I can answer now?
Thank you, Liza. I don't see any come across chat. We'll give folks a second or two. Do you, I'll just ask a question. I mean, we know that there are quite a bit of differences across the state in terms of different regions having more impacted than others. Is there anything that the state data shows that certain parts of Oregon are tighter markets or there is more need for some of these occupations in certain areas? Do you have any insight into that?
One of the things that had really came across with the vaccine mandates is healthcare workers. So already before the vaccine mandates, before COVID, we were already seeing a shortage of healthcare workers across the state, across the country. We knew it was coming down the road. And now we're seeing an acceleration in that. I mean, as everyone knows, working in healthcare has been incredibly stressful over the past 20 months. And now that the mandates are coming in, even though most healthcare workers are getting the vaccine, staying in their jobs, we are seeing some people leave. And so in an area like Portland or Eugene, that's a problem, but it's not a huge crisis because there are other people. It's, a denser environment. But in the more rural parts of the state, even if you only have 6% of nurses or 3% of nurses leave, there's nobody to take that job. So the biggest drops we've seen in number of people working in different occupations has been childcare workers and certified nursing assistants, which are both very hard, low-paying jobs. But it's created a huge shortage of those workers, and that's everywhere across the state.
Do we have any other questions for Liza at this point? Well, I think we can go ahead. Thank you so much, Liza. And I know those slides are going to be really interesting to folks. So we'll make sure to have those available. We'll send out a message after the session with links to all of that. So we'll go ahead and go over to Michele. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Liza, I think as we head into my presentation, the word I want everybody to have in their heads is flux, because we are in the middle of something that we don't totally understand. Parts of this experience are acting like previous recessions that we've had, and there's some lessons potentially we can learn, but there's a lot of this that is brand new to all of us, and we aren't really sure where people are at and what's going on. And so I think if we hold in our minds this idea that flux is a big byword right now, that's important. My name is Michele Martin. I am the Director of Technical Assistance at the Heldrick Center for Workforce Development at Rutgers University. I have been in the field of workforce development for over 25 years. I've worked with one-stop career centers. I've worked with state and local workforce boards, departments of labor, and so forth. So I've been in this business for a long time. Currently in my role at the Heldrick Center, I am overseeing a couple of projects that we have been running that we sort of see as action learning projects. One of those is the New Start Career Network, which serves New Jersey residents over the age of 45 who have been out of work for 6 or more months. That is a significant population in our current situation. Half of the people who are long-term unemployed, and 40% of the unemployed or long-term unemployed, are over 45. There's a big thing going on with older workers. I will say more about that, but that is absolutely something that's happening. Another project that we run is something called the New Jersey Career Network Online Job Seeker Community. Last September, when we saw how many people were feeling isolated and alone and lacking access to services, we wanted to expand some of the virtual services that we had been providing through the New Start Career Network to help residents across the state. And so we actually have created what we would consider sort of an online career center for job seekers that offers a lot of resources and so forth that form some of the basis of what I'm going to talk about today. So my goals are for us to, first of all, talk about what we know about job seekers and their experience of unemployment, as well as what we know are the success factors in helping people get back to work. I also want to talk a little bit about a 3-tier model of support that we have developed and been using as we think about how do we provide the most effective job search support to job seekers. And then we're going to talk about some specific strategies that you can use in support of this 3-tier model. So before I head into talking about all of that, just a couple of things. Our work is based on what we know from the actual research about what works, what doesn't work with job seekers. We also at the Heldrick Center have done extensive job seeker interviews to understand how people approach their job search, what kinds of decisions are they making on a regular basis as they go through their job search. We really have had an opportunity to get into people's heads through that research. That also informs a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you today. And then, of course, we're having direct service delivery experiences. Every day we are talking to job seekers. We are having experiences with job seekers and really kind of understanding where they're coming from. And that also is going to inform what I'm going to talk about today. From a pandemic perspective, I think that part of what has happened is that it forced us to see more clearly what is and isn't working. What are the ways that work life and everything else in our society are sustainable and are not sustainable. And that has also, it has literally affected every single person, including any staff who are working with job seekers. We're all sort of in this place of what the heck has happened. We really are at, I think, a clear inflection report and inflection point where we are thinking about, do we return to normal? What does normal even mean? What is all of this? How is this all going to land? So let me start with talking about the job seeker experience. And some of these things, Liza already talked about. We certainly know that there were certain parts of the workforce that were impacted more seriously by the recession: women, Black, Latino, and Asian workers, individuals with a high school diploma or less, and also younger workers who were first starting to attach to the workforce. Even with older workers, they were the ones who were less likely to lose their jobs in many cases, but it's harder for them to get back if they do lose their jobs. We do know that unemployment is falling, but the jobs that are coming back are relatively low quality. Often they are paying less than a living wage. If you look at the living wage calculator for your county, which you can do by looking at this, clicking on the link to the MIT living wage calculator, what you'll find is often they're paying less than a living wage. If they are paying higher wages, which we are starting to see some upward pressure on wages, there's still a lot of things going on in terms of scheduling and hours, what people are required to do, how flexible they're supposed to be. There often is a lack of benefits and opportunities to advance. So the quality of a lot of those jobs is really not great. And people are reevaluating whether or not they want to put time and effort into jobs that are, from their perspective, not of good quality. We also know that the search itself has become more complex, and in many cases, it's much more virtual. We see people having to go through applicant tracking systems, which means that they have to optimize their resumes in order to even be seen by someone. We talk to job seekers who are always talking about the black hole and how they submit resumes and never hear anything back. We also see that companies are embedding assessments, both cognitive assessments and personality assessments, in an attempt to sort of assess cultural fit. These are things that can also knock people out of consideration. Either they don't do them because they're presented with these as part of filling out an online application, or when they do, they may be answering questions in a way that companies are not looking for. We also see lots of things around doing virtual interviewing. There's now what we call one-way video interviewing, where instead of you doing a phone screen with a company, they're actually having you do one-way video screen. So they'll send you a set of questions through a tool like Yellow or HireVue. And maybe I'll get 5 interview questions. I have to record using a laptop computer my response to those questions, and then I submit that to the company, and they're going to decide based on my responses to that one-way video interview whether or not they want to talk to me further. We're seeing multiple rounds of interviews. I have talked to job seekers who have gone through 11 rounds of interviews, hiring processes that take months to get through in order to get people in. And people also having to evaluate very confusing and precarious work arrangements. The holy grail for most people is that they want that regular, quote unquote, full-time permanent job. But many positions are actually outsourced to other companies where you're doing 1099 work or third-party work, where you don't work for the company that you are going to. Say you work for a hospital, and that's where you're going to do the work, but you're actually employed by a separate organization. So there are lots of things that are very confusing and challenging for people to try to navigate and figure out, and that just adds to the stress and strain. We do know also that there have been significant increases in people reporting higher levels of anxiety and depression, as well as burnout. That's one reason that we're seeing lots of people quitting right now, is because they're just burnt out. And then, of course, the fact that, people may have childcare issues, their own concerns about COVID and so forth, all of that is really adding to a more complex job seeking situation. Liza mentioned the Great Resignation. This is a major thing that's going on. People really are reevaluating, what do I want from my work life? What is sustainable? What are the things that I'm willing to compromise on or sacrifice? And what are the things I do not want to compromise on or sacrifice? So in the midst of all of that, we've begun to think a little differently about how we serve job seekers. My typical experience in my 25 years in this field, and that includes not only working with the public workforce agencies, but we've also done some work with libraries. There tends to be the biggest focus on helping people develop job search skills and information. This is how you find job leads, this is how you do a resume, and so forth. What we have found is that we rush too quickly to this idea of helping people develop skills, and that in fact there are other things that we want to help and kind of take a look at to see if they are in place, because people cannot learn if they do not have the right foundations. And I'm going to talk about each of these in more detail, but these are really important structures that people need in order to be able to job search effectively. Very quickly, we start at the bottom with a sense of safety, and that includes not just physical safety. Do I feel physically safe? Am I going to lose my home, or am I lacking in food? What are things that they need to be connected to there? But also psychological safety. People are feeling very freaked out and agitated. I'm going to talk more about that. And that contributes to people having difficulties engaging in a job search. The second level is about having the right foundations and structures in place. When people are unemployed, they don't know where they should be prioritizing their time. They often don't have good schedules. They don't know, they're not organizing themselves well. And so without the right kinds of foundations and structures in place, it makes it more challenging for them to engage in a search. That also, foundations can also help support a feeling of physical safety and psychological safety. And then we have the job search support level, where there's both that helping people develop skills. I'm going to talk more about where we should be putting attention, as well as how do we help people maintain their mood and motivation as they go through a long job search process. Few things to keep in mind. We do work from the bottom up. People are not able to learn new information if they are in a state of psychological distress, and so trying to teach them isn't effective. We also want to think about what are ways that we can stop being the hero. And by that, I mean always just giving advice and information, and start thinking about how do we host? How do we help people feel engaged, involved, able to support one another? You're going to see that part of what we found is that peer networking and support is really key in helping people get back to work. So what are ways that we can host community and groups and so forth that help people feel more supported? We want to also be paying attention to the whole person. Job search is usually not just one thing happening in isolation. There are lots of other things that may be going on. And so how do we take those into consideration? And a good question that is often important to ask is, are people really looking for information, or are they looking for affirmation? We frequently find that people will come to us with specific questions, but that's not really what they're looking for. They're looking for validation and affirmation that they're not alone, that they're not lazy or bad people or stupid or any of those kinds of things, because those are the questions that they start asking themselves when they are in a prolonged job search. I'll stop here real quick and see, are there any questions before I talk about these different levels? Guess not, so I'll keep going. So let's talk about safety first. So when we're working with job seekers, and you may have observed this yourself, especially if you've had, some longer interactions with people, is that they often come to us feeling overwhelmed. There's so much going on. There's so many things that they need to be paying attention to, and they feel overwhelmed. We also see that they are on information overload. They say they want more information, but they really can't handle any more information. Sometimes we'll see that they have difficulty following instructions. I've had people send me emails and ask me for how to access something, and I'll give them 3 steps: step 1, step 2, step 3. They'll do steps 1 and 2, and they won't do step 3, and then they'll email me back and say, hey, it doesn't work. So they're having some challenges in following those instructions. We also will see people avoiding experiences that make them uncomfortable or bad, and job search is one of those things. They may also start to procrastinate. People, we can see that they're becoming more forgetful or having difficulty initiating tasks or following through. You may work with someone and it seems like, you've given them the information and they're gonna go and take care of it, and then they're back talking to you a couple of days later and they haven't really done anything on it. They also may appear unmotivated, and we may see emotional outbursts or people sort of in shutdown mode where they just don't seem to be able to take in new information. These are all things that are signs of impaired or affected, impacted executive function skills. Our executive function skills are the skills that we use to plan, organize, keep track of tasks, persist in goals, and so forth. These are all things that are part of our brain that we need to do work. But the problem that we're having is that people's prefrontal cortex, or that executive function, is being disrupted by trauma and chronic stress. People are actually very much in survival mode. They're in a more emotional part of their brains. And this is why they're having challenges doing these kinds of skills, these higher order thinking skills, because they're in more of a trauma mode. What we know from brain research is that when people feel safe, they are better able to learn and be curious and be able to follow instructions and so forth. But if they start to feel in danger, and that can come from chronic stress, that can come from previous experiences of trauma and so forth, this can cause them to become dysregulated, and they will start to feel a sense of fight or flight. They may then go into freeze mode as well. But being in that arousal mode keeps people from really being able to engage, because they're much more focused on, am I in danger or not? And we may see a lot of this in the people that we're working with. I'm going to go quickly through these, but there are some, there's when we think about trauma, we can understand it as both small t or big T, but basically people having an experience that may to other people seem like it's everyday stress and trauma, but in fact, it could be some major, to them, it feels major. There's also big T trauma. The pandemic, I would argue, is big T trauma. We also know that from brain research that there are experiences of childhood trauma that can impact people as well. And these have long-term effects on the folks that we're working with. We don't know what their childhoods have been like, what their previous experiences of trauma have been. But we can potentially see the impacts of that when they come in to work with us. So when we think about how are we going to work effectively with job seekers, we try to keep in mind this idea of the trauma-informed principles. I'm going to hit on a couple very quickly. One is absolutely trying to create a sense of welcome and safety for people. We also want to, as part of creating welcome and safety, is that we are very transparent with people, we are honest with people, and we are trustworthy. So if we say that we're going to have an appointment at a certain time, then we have an appointment at a certain time. If we don't know what the result is going to be, or we don't have an answer for them, we tell them those things. The more we communicate and are transparent with people, the better they feel. Looking for ways that we can provide peer support and connect people to each other so that they can help each other is also important. What we consistently see is that when job seekers are able to see other people are in the same circumstances that they are, and they can help each other, that actually improves their mood, their motivation, their ability to be able to make good decisions and move ahead in their job search and so forth. We also do things to encourage people collaborating with one another and helping them feel more empowered, more able to make their own choices. So some of the things that we do and that we really try to focus on, we're doing this largely in a virtual environment, but I think these are things that you can think about. How are we doing these in our physical space as well? We see welcoming people into interaction with us as a key function. I think libraries are already pretty good at trying to create a welcoming environment, but I think it's worth looking at what are all of our processes and the ways that people come into our space. How are we making this as welcoming and safe as possible? We do things like create welcome email series with people. So when they first come into services with us, we actually will send them a series of emails that says, welcome, you may need help with this. You may need help with your resume. You can sign up for to get a free job scan account, because that's an account that you can use to compare job postings and your resume. And that points them to specific actions that they can take. We do a lot with group coaching and connection. We do a lot of online share and support meetings where the idea is we all come together and we talk about whatever the job search issues are that people are dealing with. Are they getting ghosted, or they have questions about what should I do on my resume, or what happens when I see these kinds of job openings or whatever. That creates a sense of safety and connection. We also have been very mindful about offering well-being, particularly mental and emotional well-being activities. So we have volunteers who do mindfulness meditation with our people, yoga classes. We have done a series called Self-Compassion for the Job Seeker to help people use mindfulness meditation and compassion techniques to be easier on themselves in the job search. All of that is in service of helping people feel less agitated, less scared, and more able to calm themselves and be able to engage with the search. We have actually found that that is sort of the number one way that we've been helping people get back to work. We had folks, honestly, that we thought might not ever find another job again, but they've participated in these activities and they're working and very happy with where they found themselves. So we have the safety and well-being piece, the next piece is really thinking about structure. What are ways that we can help people and point people to the kinds of structures that they need? We have created, we have a whole bunch of webinars that we've done on job search, and we created roadmaps to those webinars that we set up in Google Docs, where we put together webinars that are thematically related. So we have webinars on like a roadmap to developing an effective job search plan, roadmap to interviewing, and so forth, so that people can work through those as they want to, and can refer to them again and again. That's better, we found, than doing like a live workshop that people might miss. This gives them a chance to stop, follow up on things in the videos, and so forth. We also try to create checklists for people that show them sort of steps they should follow. The example I have here is like, this is a job search daily checklist. What are things that you should do every day? We've done checklists on like, check this, what should you do before you submit a resume? All of these kinds of things. I mentioned that we do daily share and support meetings. Part of the reason that we do that is because it does give people sort of a structure for their days. And so they know that if I have nothing else going on, I can at least make sure that every day I'm going to the meetings. We have looked at creating group accountability activities where they are holding each other accountable. One of the things we did was a 15-day LinkedIn challenge where people were posting on LinkedIn on a daily basis, but they were working to do that together and to support one another and so forth. So we really look at trying to find ways to help people be accountable, be organized, and kind of know what their priorities are and where they should be putting their effort. The third level that I talked about was about both the skill development and the motivation. We do know from the research that the people who are most successful in finding work have clarity about the work that they want to be doing and how they fit into the labor market. They put in the right levels of intensity. They're spending regular time on their job search, not too much time, but also not too little time. They feel a sense of self-efficacy. They feel like they have, they kind of have things under control. And they're also tracking their job search activity. They're being organized with their job search activities, and they know what they're doing. We want to look at ways that we can support them in getting clearer and making sure that they are spending a good amount of time on their search and organizing themselves and so forth. The other big thing that I want to say as we think about this is we do have a tendency, I think, to overutilize educating people. So here's information, here's a workshop on how to do something, but we are not necessarily giving them the support they need in actually doing those things. So people really do need opportunities to practice their search. Honestly, they're learning from their search as they go, and they need opportunities to practice submitting applications and getting feedback on those. They need opportunities to practice interviewing and so forth. They also tend to do better if they are doing that in community with other people, because that gives them a place to, one, feel like they aren't alone, but also people like them are having similar experiences, and they're more likely to listen to advice and feedback from people who have been going through the same things they are. So we do look at ways to provide opportunities for practice and feedback. We even have done things like Rate the Room, where because we knew people were doing more video interviewing, we ran online Rate the Room sessions where people could come on and we would all work together to give feedback on how's the lighting, what's your background like, and so forth. We do a lot of webinars and panels. We try to bring in people from HR people and knowledgeable people so that they can do Q&As with our folks. We also look at an ongoing series of curated resources. So we're always looking for articles and videos and other kinds of resources, not things that we necessarily have created ourselves, but that we can share with people that address their specific needs and issues. We also really are wanting to think about how we help people with the roller coaster of moods. We try to help them understand that it is totally normal for people to have this roller coaster of moods, and that a lot of times if they're on this roller coaster, it can be because they are not feeling safe, because they're feeling more threatened and agitated, or it can also be because they don't really have a good process in place, and they need to go back and really kind of look at what the structure is. Ultimately, we want to normalize that people are going to be like this in the search, because frankly, search isn't fun. But we also have to find ways to, we may need to withdraw, take a break, but we also want to be coming back to this search. Again, we do a lot around well-being activities and really trying to have people purposely build into their time and their days, do engaging in well-being activities like yoga, meditation. We actually did a whole series in January, this past January, of art activities, and that really helped people feel good. We actually got feedback from the month-long series of arts activities and well-being activities that was the only thing that got a lot of people through January. And it was something that helped them persist. And many of the folks who participated in those activities actually ended up finding jobs in February and March, because it kind of helped them keep things going. Just some other practices to think about. If you're doing workshops, we encourage people to think about doing something called the flipped workshop. Rather than having people come in and listen to you present on resume writing, for example, what you do is you have people watch a video or review materials prior to the event. And the workshop is actually, okay, you had a chance to take a look at this video. Let's talk about what questions you have. How does this apply in your particular circumstance? So you might, for example, have people doing a resume workshop, but it might be very targeted and chunked. Let's do the professional summary section of your resume. Watch this video. Do your best effort at writing the professional summary of your resume. And then the workshop is coming in, sharing that with other people. Let's help you, improve it, make it better, and so forth. So it's more concrete and tangible, and it lets people spend the interaction time really getting practice and feedback. We also encourage using Drive to share and store templates, checklists. I know we do a lot with paper, and there may be times to do that, but you can leverage a lot of resources across library locations. And then looking at how can you use texting tools. There are tools like Remind and Text Now, where people can sign up and you can do check-ins with them. You can send inspirational information, resources. We talked to some case managers during the pandemic who were using texting to stay in regular daily contact with people, doing check-ins and sending them inspirational information. And again, that really helped people stay engaged throughout the process. Just some final thoughts. I do think that libraries have a particular set of strengths in communities. You already have trusting relationships with your patrons. People see you as a resource that is going to be helpful, unlike some other organizations that I've worked with, and that's something that you can build on and grow from. I would also, thinking about all this stuff that I've talked about today, are there simple strategies that you could try? Are there simple things that are already working that maybe you can enhance or amplify in order to provide more support? I do think we should be thinking about how can we use technology and interaction with people, partly because so much technology is involved in, and digital literacy is involved in just about every job. So how can we provide a safe space for people to feel comfortable using technology, but also how do we leverage technology so that we free people up to focus on things like, coaching and so forth. It's one of the reasons why I think doing things like webinars can be really effective and helpful, because you could have one person do a webinar across across all libraries. And then within the library, you could have actual staff who are then helping people figure out how they apply that knowledge, or how can they, they could be facilitating discussion groups and so forth. I already mentioned this idea of moving from hero to host, but I think we want to be intentional about how do we build communities of job seekers, of people who are able to support each other and connect to each other. And not just see ourselves as providing information, looking at ways we can leverage resources. And also, libraries don't obviously have to be the only organizations providing things. One of the things that I really loved and saw during the pandemic was the extent to which libraries were reaching out to people in the community to have those community members provide workshops and other kinds of things online. That is something that I hope continues. I think that there were a lot of good things that came out of that virtual engagement. There are people who physically, it is more difficult for them to come into the library for a variety of reasons. And thinking about yourselves more broadly than just a physical location, I think can really, go a long way towards, being able to even enhance and build on what you already are doing well. So that was a lot. I'm going to stop sharing. I see if there are any questions, thoughts.
Well, we did have a couple of questions, but I do think they might, one is kind of specific to some of the WorkSource network in Oregon. So I was thinking, Liza might be able to address one of the questions at least, well, several of these. So one was asking about the automatic tracking system used by JobScan and the resources offered by iMatch. Liza, are you familiar with that system, and can you answer that question?
I'm somewhat familiar with iMatch, but not, I can't answer that question. That's something that goes through the workforce boards, but it's not something that I have personal experience with.
Yeah. Okay.
If I could,
sure.
Even though I know that I'm not in Oregon. So JobScan basically is something that allows people to copy and paste their job posting and their resume, and it will give specific feedback on how much of a match are you. So you're a 35% match. And it will also give very specific feedback on what you can do to improve the match. So it will say things like, your document name is too long, and you need to change that. You don't have the right keywords in your resume to match with the high level keywords that this employer is looking for. That's what JobScan does. I'm guessing iMatch doesn't. I'm not aware of any state workforce tools that are that way. But I could be wrong.
Well, I do think it demonstrates the issue of it's really good for libraries to do their best to connect to their local WorkSource offices and get a good understanding of the resources that are available to folks in the services that the WorkSource offices here in Oregon can provide, and then think about maybe ways that if they can't provide it, are there other tools out there that a library can support in that way? And there are a number of vendors that provide either online coaching for job seekers, or do that career exploration type of thing that might be able to fill in that need. So I wanted to also there was a question right at the end of Liza's presentation that was asking about COVID-related disability. Liza, did you have any information about that?
I do know that we've seen a big increase both of workers who aren't able to work due to COVID and people who are caring for family members who aren't able to work during COVID. And I just saw, which I can send to you, Arlene, if you want to share it with the audience. I just saw a slide from the Oregon Employment Department that was looked at a survey of workers and why they aren't going back to work over the past 3 months. And that was one of the top responses was illness due to COVID.
Okay. So we have some comments talking about the kind of more of a holistic services approach to working with job seekers. And let's see, Liza, do you have any stats about in-demand certifications beyond the top ones you mentioned? Or do you have some suggestions about how library staff could actually look for that kind of information?
That's a good question. I do have that information, but I have it through a proprietary data source that I have a subscription to. So let me give that some thought. And if I come up with anything, I will let you know.
Okay. Okay. I did want to ask Michele a question about, I think libraries traditionally feel pretty comfortable at that level of service that you described, where they're providing, resources for skill building and kind of, handing over resources to help people. But I think what is a little bit more difficult is this thinking about different kinds of supports that looks at, the holistic situation. And when you say try something that's already working, or I think that a lot of libraries haven't really approached working with job seekers in quite the same way. So do you have any suggestions to like take on small things, like
Right.
what could work in terms of like a small peer group, kind of setting?
Well, there are groups in New Jersey, for example. So now this is not run by the Mercer County Library. It's housed at the Mercer County Library, which is in the Princeton area. But they have something called PSG, Professional Services Group, that meets there on a weekly basis. This is actually something, this is something that I think libraries could host and facilitate, because these groups, basically what happens with them is they get special speakers. People come and listen to the speaker. It's all related to different aspects of search, and then they network with one another following the event. So on a real simple level, having something like that, maybe you experiment with that, where we're gonna, for 6 months, once a month, we're going to experiment with, trying to start up this group and having these presentations that where it's also like a networking opportunity that could also, be done online. So, I think that is a relatively simple, low risk kind of thing that libraries could experiment with. You could do something like, so that 15-day challenge idea that I mentioned, basically what that was is they worked together as an accountability group. There were prompts every day. Today, go on and use hashtags. This is what hashtags are. Go on and use hashtags, comment on each other's, LinkedIn posts. Let's talk about how that went. I could see libraries running a 5-day challenge and having specific, prompts or tasks that people did. And then, they would be able to, share and talk about that. So I think it's kind of a matter of what are some different ways we could reorient ourselves to this and be kind of more creative. Honestly, people are super burnt out. Now's a good time to be planning and thinking with maybe looking at trying stuff out in 2022, because my experience right now has been we're having a really hard time with engagement nothing has changed from our end as far as the things that we're doing. I mean, things have changed, but I think people are burnt out, like burnt out, and definitely at a place of like, what do I want my life to look like? Now's a good time to plan for things that you could do later. I hope that is helpful.
Yeah, well, I think it's encouraging, that, libraries trying outreach in all different kinds of areas of their services, maybe experiencing something similar. So it's not unique to libraries feeling burned out. But also, I think it does speak to, that, networking with the community, the places in your community where they're maybe offering similar kinds of services, and maybe trying to build your own network of,
Right.
and collaborate together to put together some of these kinds of sessions. I think that's a good way to kind of help you over the burden of that burnout, and maybe build stronger relationships with other community organizations. And I just wanted to also mention in the chat that it was mentioned that libraries are looking more at hiring social workers, resource specialists. That's happening in libraries. Certainly we see that in Oregon as well. And to have them think about ways that they could support some of these job seekers and create, again, these peer network group activities might be something that is suggested to those libraries that do have that kind of resource specialist there. So, well, we are at noon, so I think I will go ahead and call it to a close. I do want to remind folks, thank you for attending, and thank you very much to our speakers. I do want to put into the chat just before we leave, if you have a moment to please do fill out our evaluation survey. Whoops. Sorry. So we can get feedback about our sessions, and if you want to see us do other topics, particularly around workforce or any other topics that you'd like to see the State Library go and do, that would be great. So if you could fill out that survey, and we will send links out to the recording and other materials that we've mentioned with the slides and everything later. So thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.